Okay, we are live, Infinite playing Saturnday, November the 23rd, 2024. Phones are immediately open. I realized I've fallen behind on voicemail. It's Fepe Akbar featuring Lean Dion, which is true. And someone was just asking me for a wrench by voicemail.
For a wrench. Check me out. I'll be sending some comments off and on. And anyway, take care, man. Bye.
Yeah, I think I got it. If you leave a comment below the videos, I go into my community section and one by one, heart wrench, heart wrench, heart wrench. No exceptions, except for the people that I ban, which is rare and only well-deserved. Now, we did talk a little bit about the JFK Mandela effect. The guy left a really long message about it, and I would like for this person to call in.
Me by some kind of thought thing or whatever.
I would like to call in so we can talk about the misconception, because we have this, we have like memories, or I guess imaginings, which we conflate with memories, and it's all a mind game, and we need to learn how sleight of mind works, because it does. So let's go over a few points of interest while we wait for the raft. We've got SpaceX 666 just launched off a new batch of CubeSats. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim. Oh, hold on. I didn't think I was going to go through. Hey, so really quick about the JFK stuff. I can't believe this. Here's one thing about the JFK video that just came out. Maybe you can reflect on this. I'm not sure. But what would you say if I immediately thought that there was some artificial intelligent, kind of video editing? Let's say, the software that we have is old, right? The current software for Leonardo AI or ChatGPT, whatever, it's like already old, and hypothetically, this is my theory. The AI that they're operating with is like way out in the future. Like they can make these videos seem so real, that, it's convincing to us a little bit. And yeah, sure. Maybe there was like some video of JFK, like pretending to kill himself or being assassinated or something, like, the days before he was really assassinated, like pre-programming. Wow, that's crazy. But like, what have you ever thought about that? Like even for today's stuff, like,
look, I got
like the stuff that they have in the news, like it's just so convincing, that, and we know it's fake.
No, you bring up a good point.
You bring up, thought about that,
one
Tim?
point you bring up is this. The deepfake technology using hyper-realistic masks was classified until 2015, and at that time they started talking about digital deepfakes after the old tech had been declassified. So whatever they're showing us right now could very well be behind what their true capabilities are. And I was recently fooled by a whale-sized clownfish. Like, that's how good this stuff is. I didn't even question it because I saw it, and I was like, okay, that's huge. I didn't think it was fake. And so there is this possibility that, sure, there is a more advanced version of everything, definitely. They certainly don't show it off, though, with NASA, which is woefully inadequate. Their special effects are stuck in 2015. So I tend to think that you might have a point here, though, that we don't have the most cutting edge. That's going to be held back, so they have an advantage over us. Absolutely.
Well, I think it's a tell, just like playing, poker. I think it's what they're revealing a little bit of their cards when a video like this, anything that's never before seen, right? Never before seen footage, or never before seen photos of the Titanic, or never before seen photos of, insert blank. There's a lot of something to that I think a lot of us are tracking. Anything that, there's a lot of anniversaries coming up, right? And I think they use this information to really call attention to those anniversaries. I think there's something important. We have a lot of analysis with regards to like numbers, and there's some really good people in the Discord and Gilded that analyze like star placements and horoscopes and astrology and astronomy. And I think there's a combination of all those things that really they have to say, okay, XYZ stars are coming back into placement, so insert what we should be reminding the public about, whatever it is. I think that is a certain level of communication, and they use it as a utility, and we're still working through it, but it's just I think it's really powerful to like just understand that just this one JFK video, that just resurfaced is, we've been tracking it a lot, and then RFK is like, kind of in the limelight a lot now. So, I mean, I think it's going to be something that it's going to be easy to see and identify.
Yeah, well, look, they almost JFK'd Trump. And then on the anniversary of JFK's assassination, Marilyn Manson releases a video an album called One Assassination Under God, in which he portrays the Umbrella Man, the one who was closest to JFK. And I think the theme of the song, the message is something, it's all about you will all be entertained. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. We're seeing the pageantry of the world state church and its mythologies. They're creating myths. These aren't false flags. It wasn't a real assassination. It was a contemporary myth, much like a crucifixion, which is one of the common themes we see as well here, especially with regard to the QAnon and their deification of Trump.
Right, just another version of propaganda to stick into our minds, whether we're on one side or another, it's a very memorable moment in time. And one other thing about the JFK assassination I wanted to slip in there is I feel like throughout my lifetime, I'm new to I can't really say I'm new to this group, but I mean, I'm newer than most. But regardless, I've always been exposed to some version of conspiracy with regards to the JFK assassination. And I've never heard of the maybe I'm still a noob, but I've never heard of the driver of the vehicle, being like a possible, gunman or whatever. And that's new to me too this past week.
Really?
So
Okay.
I heard that, and I was like, yeah.
William Cooper. William Cooper, actually.
I know.
Well, I mean, if you look, you can see it. If you zoom in, it looks like it. But then you can also make the case that Jackie blew his head off. But someone else had suggested, and I think this is likely true, you're seeing a Jim Henson Muppet, and Jackie was pulling the ripcord that causes the head to explode, and she's crawling on the back of the car to get the canister. That's kind of where I'm at with that one. Now, can I get your opinion on the Heinz 57? How 2 months before the assassination, JFK staged his own death with Jackie in a home movie where he was lying dead in the foyer covered in Heinz 57 when the Secret Service came in.
Well, I mean, anytime I think of Heinz 57, I always think, well, okay, everything is linked somehow, right? And I don't really have an opinion, but I always think about Mitt Romney, because isn't he married? Well, I don't know. Lynn or Tell might be like a better person for this, obviously, but like, isn't Mitt Romney's wife or I always mix this up. There's someone is married to the Heinz, like whatever money, the family that owns like Heinz. I think Mitt Romney is married into that, so I think there's something there too.
Could be. I just think it's weird though that he's faking his own death 2 months before. Yeah. In a video that hasn't even been released yet, but 61 years after, somebody actually gets this footage. And so I'm anxious to see the footage itself. And it's like, why is JFK pretending to die 2 months before his actual death?
Well, that's the thing is like, what in 60 years we haven't seen this before? Come on, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. After all the attention on this is like Princess Diana, right? It's another anniversary kind of thing. I mean, I'm not sure when the anniversary is, but I mean, it's just that anytime there's something close to the day, of the anniversary of blah, 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 they always kind of bring something back into the news, never before seen, never before seen photos, never before heard information, And so I think, the ketchup thing, it's like whatever. But I mean, the actual period, like the video itself just coming out of the blue is kind of telling, and I'm sure they're bringing it back. There has to be an ultimate motive. I don't know.
Well, let me underscore your points here. One thing, you have to be skeptical. So people are going to be skeptical if we're talking about astrological alignments with media events. But every New Year's Eve at midnight, Sirius reaches the highest point, and then it falls for the rest of the year. And so the dog star, Sirius, is the center of the ritual every New Year's. And we're celebrating it with the ball drop in the countdown unwittingly. And I'm just pointing out how they get the whole world synchronized around what is ultimately something of astrological significance. And it has a mythos behind it. It's not just the astronomical alignment, but it's the story and the fact that this is the god star of all the secret societies. So,
gosh, I'm like, so see, I'm not as sharp as many of the people on Gilded, but I believe the anniversary of JFK's assassination, it's this month, right?
It's the 22nd. It's the day we enter Sagittarius. And Micah Dank, who wrote a number of books on the subject of astrotheology, suggested that 1122 is significant to Sagittarius, the archer, and Oswald being the archer in the story, shooting the Sun King. And he says this is the same symbol of the spear piercing the side of Christ, and it represents the part of the year where the sun ostensibly dies.
Oh man, that's what sets this group apart from many others. I make it an extreme effort to, branch out. Swear to God, and it's just like there's so much available out there for like fringe information, but that level of analysis is why I'm here, because I don't know that stuff. Like I really don't. This Cub Star in the Gilded, it's sharp as a tack. Like all that information that you guys like talk about there is fantastic. So I don't know. I really didn't call it. I'm kind of just like still.
Well, you might like this, because we're talking about, generally speaking, we're talking about our manufactured history and the foreshadowing leading up to it. 'Cause it's like almost like movie analysis, film studies. And Synchromorpheus points out that Jay Leno injured his ear in a previous accident, and now it's his eye.
That's right.
So he's suggesting that this could be a sequence, a form of predictive programming for Trump, ear, eye.
I mean, that could be anything. That could be so much, and it is so unusual. Right, I heard about that story. He's just falling randomly. Like, I don't really know where he lives, but it's like a hill in Pennsylvania or something like that.
Yeah, this is a guy with $500 million who's staying at a Hampton Inn, and he's walking home unattended and falls down a 60-foot hill. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's so bogus, and I mean, maybe there's an age-related ritual where, yes, he's completed XYZ steps, and now, if you want to make it to the next step or level, you have to evolve in such a way where, you have to do this, and, I don't know, man. Tim, that's the beauty of this, is like, we'll probably never know. We can make all the, theories and predictions and stuff. We're still in the sandbox. We don't know the limits of our infinite plane. Well,
I think it's important, though. So, I think it's important to say what we do know and stand on it, and then also acknowledge what we know not to be true, so it doesn't get a pass. But we also have to be willing to always point out when we don't know something, which is fundamentally what we're doing here. Because just asking questions is not enough. Just being confused is not enough. We have to find those answers. And what we have discerned in the last few years, just through pattern analysis and observing news as it unfolds, is that there is obviously a purposeful synchronization between entertainment and future news events. And this is routine, it's systemic, it's intrinsic to what media is.
And that's where I must leave. I think you have a fantastic analysis of what's going on right here. I'm a listener. I'm a learner. I'll bow out. I do. Can I add one more fun thing since it's
yes,
kind of like the weekend? Is that just related but not related? Is that all right? Can I do one more thing?
Please, by all means.
All right, cool. I've been waiting to tell you about there's one show on that used to be on Comedy Central Network called it was like oh my God, what was it called? It was by the creators, the same creators as Archer, but prior to Archer, they did, it's called Frisky Dingo. That's why I couldn't remember it. It's just such a random name, but it's Frisky Dingo. And if anyone remembers that, the same comedy troupe used to do C Lab 2021, and there's a bunch of other shows that they did. But Frisky Dingo was a very short, and by the way, it's free online, very short show. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it's eventually, it's bad guy and like a good, almost like a good guy billionaire sort of, and they get tangled up in a funny, I guess, way of events. But like one is a billionaire, and they end up running for president, and there's a lot of similarities to kind of what's going on today. It was like one of the billionaire was shot in his ear, and I think the bad guy that is also running for president has oh gosh, he's like a penguin. He has like a penguin as like his mascot. Oh man, and it's climate change. There's a bunch of like really funny twists and turns that are extremely related to like what we're talking about. It's really funny. So if anyone out there, can find like kind of like the similarities to it. It's a free show. Every episode is like 10 minutes long, but you won't be disappointed. So I'll just throw that out there. So.
Okay, this is great. Thank you. And I'll look into Frisky Dingo. It looks entertaining for sure. Adult Swim. Okay, cool.
Oh, it's awesome.
All right, well, thank you for the call.
All right, thanks, Sam.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, excellent call. All right, looks like the raft is kind of filled up here. Who was first today? Patricia Steer. Then Pete Trippa, the caller, Benton, Diana South, Matt X, J5, Observing Reality, Ahoy Mateys. And yeah, phones are open, so feel free to interrupt. Deprogrammed Truther, Benton says they lowered a little person into the well. That's how they got Timmy out. Yeah, I've been wondering, how did they get Timmy out of the well? The Mandela effected who assert that everybody knows he fell down the well. They can never explain how they got him out. See, ears up, Lucid Streams says, absolutely have no doubt what we know of AI is only the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, that's got to be the case. World Stage has joined us. Matt X says, I agree with caller. AI could create loads of unseen footage. Yeah, no doubt. They could like retroactively create stuff to reinforce something that was fake. Like they could create perhaps even documents and death certificates and autopsy reports. I mean, who knows the extent of their capabilities when it comes to fakeability. And that's an important term. I have it in our lexicon, fakeability. We have to be aware of what is actually fakeable, not just at a small scale, but at large scale, and what isn't fakeable at scale. Like there are people who say gorillas are fake or pandas are fake. Well, you could fake it in a small setting, a zoo, one guy in a costume, but you can't do it, quote, globally. And that's the case with a lot of these things people assert. So we have to think about the scalability, but fakeability. What is in their tool chest? Okay, let's see. Joined by Mizell, Synchromorpheus. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up about Jay Leno's ear wound preceding his eye wound. You might be onto something here. Okay, Jay Leno suffers brutal injuries from hitting his head on a rock after a stupid mistake. And then Jay Leno has brand new ear. That's right, he lost his ear. Okay, good connection there. He lost his entire ear. I'm glad you brought this up because I'm working on a series of paintings which are just basically mind maps that I'm doing in Sharpie marker, and then I'm coloring it in. And I'm doing one now with the profile of Trump's head, and I'll probably paint it live, but it's going to be all of the connections to the ear thing. And I want to do something similar with another couple of themes here. Happy Saturnday, says Penguin Doctor. Michelle Kastner, thanks for joining. Unmitigated Mind says, imagine how much money found footage of these events will bring. Monetary incentive. Yeah, exactly. American Fathers, Cub Star, Messianic Charlatan, Z Proxy. Okay, we're pretty full here. Phones are open. Joined also by Mom with Sons and Chris's wife. We got more than 100 people. Didn't take very long. And we had someone else attempting to call in if you want to redial the number. So we're talking about SpaceX 666 liftoff.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4.
Now, I don't believe this is a rocket ship going to space. I believe this is an obelisk. This is a religious rite in the Church of Mythology, and this represents part of Osiris. And this is a fertility ritual, more or less, resurrection. But here you go, lift off. SpaceX 666.
3, 2, 1. And lift off. Go SpaceX, go Starlink.
Falcon 9.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Now, I'm pretty sure Falcon 9 has 33 engines. Let me go ahead and check on that. The Starship has 33 engines. Why does it have 33? It references the vertebrae in the human spine, because ultimately space travel is just an allegory for higher states of consciousness. Yep, NASA is a mystery school, and that's an obelisk. But unlike the old ones made out of stone, like the one that the Pope prays to, the new obelisks actually have fireworks on the bottom, and they fly to heaven, like literally. Benton says, shout out to Ham's Worm Hat and fake pandas. Yeah, he didn't believe in duck platypuses. He didn't believe in toucans. He said toucans were just regular parrots with a plastic beak attached. And like, you can find time lapses of these birds hatching in their various stages of development. Like, it's not a mystery. And the argument that this or that animal is fake comes from an appeal to mostly personal incredulity. There's a bit of an appeal to motive, saying that they are faking stuff. And it also relies heavily on an appeal to ignorance. They can't do any research because it would actually destroy their claim. And think about it. This doesn't make any sense. If you're going to call pandas fake to get attention, and you really believed it, and you really wanted attention, you would prove it, and then you'd be famous. You'd be famous as the panda debunker, and everybody would know your name. You'd be instantly famous. But the people who do it for clicks never actually investigate, which is a little shady. It's like, well, what is the incentive here? It almost seems like you don't really believe that pandas don't exist. You're a fake panda disbeliever. You actually believe in pandas. And if you didn't believe in pandas, you would prove they didn't exist. So anybody saying that pandas don't exist, they're just automatically suspect in my book. Okay, let's continue. Chris's wife says, my mother's birthday is 6/11. She's the last in a line of Masons, keeping my eye on her for activation. Yeah, when they send out the signal. You know, I was doing some research today on Fritz Springmeier, the guy who wrote the book about totally undetectable mind-controlled Illuminati slaves, that MK Ultra book, and I came across some interesting information, some huge holes in his story. I'm not going to get into his background, the bank robbery. I don't know if that matters. It's a little suspect. But also there's connections to the CIA through his father. So I tend to think that the entire mind control, multiple personality, MK Ultra thing is fake. And it's to cover up actors and directors. It's not handlers and multiple personality mind controlled celebrities. It's directors and actors who assume different roles. It's far more likely that mind control theories are just there to hide the fact that they're faking various aspects of reality. So they're not following the words of a pre-programmed handler or a script that a handler somehow put into their mind, but rather, because that's MK Ultra, the idea that these things have been planted subconsciously and they can be activated later. I'm saying we're just looking at actors and they kind of hide it. Zapruder got paid $16 million for his JFK vid, 1/6 again. Interesting. And he gets all the credit, even though it was really shot by Stanley Kubrick. Down in South says Fritz is an actor. Well, he came across my attention today because I'm listening to a podcast by these individuals talking about Stanley Kubrick. And I've come to a conclusion about Stanley Kubrick and what I'm calling Kubrick myopia. I think Kubrick myopia is a limited hangout operation. In other words, he's one of the most obvious examples of what we call metascripting, of predictive programming, of this interaction between past entertainment and future news. In particular, The Shining stands out because it's well known for its references to Apollo 11 and it came out after the fact, but then it also contains a lot of foreshadowing for 9/11, which hadn't happened yet. And Kubrick, for a lot of reasons, gets a lot of attention as being like the whistleblower who is trying to tell us about everything. Like, he feels bad about faking the moon landing. He's dropping clues. And there's an entire like discipline of Kubrickology where they just study Kubrick in all of his movies and they read into every nuance, which is fine. The trouble is the individuals who are hyper-focused on Stanley Kubrick don't look at all the other directors or authors or video games or comics or cartoons through the similar lens. So I kind of think he's a limited hangout operation where they purposefully let a lot of people focus on room 237, on the moon landing stuff. And then they assert that he helped NASA fake the moon landing. That was, I think, a intentional leak. And it's probably notable that Kubrick's daughter's a Scientologist. That's kind of interesting in itself. But she asserts he didn't fake the moon landing, and if he had, it would have looked better. It's all distraction. Because the moon landing, the space program, is just part of this whole agenda, which is actually about worldview warfare. And the same entities faking space are faking the stuff on the ground. You can point at Kubrick as having a role in the JFK assassination. Likely the death of Monroe. Must have directed that. Apollo 11, 9/11. You see his fingerprints on 2020 and the Trump head wound scenario. I think all of these things can be traced back to Kubrick. But then you have other directors who are equally represented in the world stage scripts. You got the Nolan brothers, who are huge. Oppenheimer, Fallout, the whole Batman and the Batman universe synchronization with everything having to do with Trump. So these are intentional instances of propaganda messaging being Trojan horsed into our minds. And it's intended to make you susceptible to future fake news. And it works. It works like a charm. In fact, they write our history and they perform it. We are living in a manufactured history. They literally make history day by day using media in this fashion. It's really the biggest secret. And I noticed, though, that there are people who have focused on Kubrick to the exclusion of seeing the big picture. So I'm listening to these individuals talking about him and how he's trying to blow the whistle on MK Ultra. And he's revealing about the Hollywood elite and how they're all pizza gators. And it has me thinking, too, that the entire QAnon story and the whole Pizzagate story is likely fake and written as a subtext to the metascript itself. That it's designed to be found by truthers, but it was never true. It was always a witch hunt. It was always a hoax. And I think the facts kind of bear that out. We've had enough time. No children have been saved by any QAnons. Now it's like, forget about saving the children, save the QAnoners. Like, their cult is just destroying their lives. It's wasting their time. JFK is not going to come back to save them. Isabel Ann, got your wrench back. Awesome. Yeah, again, anybody comment below? Unmitigated says the JFK home movie was 16 minutes long and shot on 16 millimeter film. Fascinating. I pointed out how Oppenheimer was filmed on IMAX film 11 miles long, which weighs 600 pounds. And then Oppenheimer wears the badge that says K6, which is 11.6. So 611, 11.6 throughout this metascript have been used as code for domestic violent extremists nuking America, releasing the Kraken. And I think that's coming. The Poseidon thing keeps popping up. Okay, let's move on. So we're talking about, again, Musk announces a plan to buy MSNBC and turn it into a news network. This would comport with his overall agenda of exposing this vulnerability in our system to rich individuals who assert too much control over the commons. So this is a scare that's being pushed around. It's by the Babylon Bee. He does agree with it. He has jokingly talked about it, about buying MSNBC. I don't think it's serious, but even if it is, it's just meant to suggest that, hey, these rich right-wing influencers are clouding our commons. And this guy's polluting not just cyberspace, which is a direct pathway to our inner space, but low Earth orbit. And he was denied several launching pads in California because of his online speech. And I've already correlated this, that he is the number one source of mind junk on the internet and the number one source of space junk. So this is an issue they created so the public will acquiesce and actually beg for censorship and for stopping people like Musk. You know, Babylon Bee just put out a movie mocking January 6th. I'd like to check it out. World Stage says, do truthers ever consider that if MK Ultra had been real, why would they let us know about it? Any leaks or declassified stuff is given to us for a reason. It's simple reverse psychology. Truthers don't believe anything mainstream. They don't believe the government. But if it's leaked, they believe it. Think about the success of Project Veritas. His whole MO is going out to drink with somebody who knows something, and then they leak it. Everything they leak is fake and pointless. It's just narrative. It's just story time. But because it's, quote, leaked, it has credibility with truthers. Truthers are gullible in that way. And that's why so many of them are hooked on the Q pipes. Like, put it down already. You know, life is short, and we need to focus. And that's why I think it's important to update our models, update our assumptions. And we have a lot of new information. So, as I was saying with the caller, we're very well aware of what we don't know. But in no way are we confused. If you don't know, and you can only say you believe, and you believe because you have little information, then your position is weaker than that of somebody who is highly informed and doesn't believe in it because they have enough information to rule it out as true. So informed non-belief, not mere low info non-belief. We're not just rejecting it because it's mainstream. We know very well why we don't believe a lot of the crap people do believe in. And when you disbelieve something, it doesn't leave a hole. It's not like, oh, I used to believe something, now I missed that thing. No, actually, it frees up your bandwidth. Your attention is highly sought after, so why disperse it? They Lie We See says whistleblowers are fake AF. Yeah, how many people thought, I mean, they turned Julian Assange into some kind of a saint. They believed that he was related to Trump and Tesla, and he was going to reveal the secret technology, the free energy. They just get caught up in their hopium dreams. And it's pretty sad, but is it any sadder than any other religion? They all kind of promise the same thing. And QAnon is a religion. It's not a political movement. In fact, they don't have anything coherent about them anymore. It's anything goes. I was just trying to go through the list of JFK Jr. fakers, JFK fakers. And the list keeps growing. Oh, the Elvis fakers. They fall for this guy named Bob Joyce, who pretends to be Elvis. He doesn't look like Elvis. He's 30 years too young. But he's a pastor. And pastors don't lie, right? Okay, let's continue here. Again, I put my talking points up here. IPR, points of interest. Kubrick, myopia. Limited hangout. This is a couple weeks old. Modern day SS white supremacist sentence and plot to destroy energy facility. The only reason I'm bringing this up is that this is a repeated story and it continues from yesterday. This is out of the Turner Diaries. And we were talking about Waco and McVeigh last night. And the Turner Diaries narrative, which is all about attacking the power grid. And this was the story, like that article is the story of Leave the World Behind in part. Domestic violent extremists attacking the power grid, the blackout. Okay, SpaceX launched 24 small sats on Thursday. That's what it was for, the Group 666. FEMA chief asked, do you control the weather? Or do you send hurricanes to Trump areas? They're so gullible. Now, this is what happens if you accept a bad premise. You accept chemtrails into your life, into your mind. Now your brain is clouded with chemtrails, and now you believe that man controls the weather. And I think it's highly ironic that the people who think that FEMA controls the weather and sends hurricanes to Trump voters' houses don't believe in climate change, and they laugh at Greta. It's like, no, Greta can laugh at you if this is where you're at. But let me play this clip here.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Administrator, for your service. I want to show you a visual Do you recognize this picture?
I do not.
Good. It's an atmospheric research facility in Alaska that, believe it or not, conspiracy theorists allege is a mind-controlling weather machine. And
He's talking about HARP. And some people believe that HARP controls the weather, but climate change is a hoax. That's what they say.
one of the conspiracy theories out there is that somehow FEMA controls the weather. And I assume that you, as the administrator, do not control the weather, right?
I do not control the weather.
There you have it. FEMA chief says that she does not control the weather. Now, she could be lying, but he goes on. This is pretty rich. It's bad.
That state, right?
Why would anybody want to bring harm to the American people?
And you would not direct severe weather to target anyone of a particular political party, right?
Never.
You're not establishing FEMA camps to detain individuals or enact martial law, right?
Correct.
Now, FEMA camps are a huge hoax, and they've already put you in one. The FEMA camp is your comfortable home theater in front of your Netflix. That is the FEMA camp. And we're all there. If you locked down in 2020, you were in the decentralized FEMA camp and you were your own warden. It's pretty simple. There's no reason to gather people up where they might resist, and then you have to take care of them like a bunch of animals in a barn. No, you just decentralize the containment operation. So, not going to happen. And also, FEMA coffins don't exist. Those are called burial vaults. I've been debunking that one for some time. Tucker Carlson is in the Pilgrims Society. This was posted, I think it was, oh yes, Messianic Charlatan sent this to me. He's a member of the Pilgrim Society. It's very high up in the apparatus of the establishment. It's tied to the Rhodes-Milner Society, and it gave birth to globalism that Tucker pretends to fight against. Tucker's an interesting character. Gets attacked by aliens in his sleep. Or so he says, and everybody believes him. He claims he has scars, and he doesn't show them. So here he is. He's on the list. Has he been to the Bohemian Grove with Kid Rock and Alex Jones? Checking up on your comments here. Abe Zapruder's film A to Z, likely scripted A to Z Alpha Omega. JFK's Christification. I kind of like that. Could be. One of the mind maps I was working on is the correlation of the Joker character and the Trump assassination theme. And it goes deep because we're finding, of course, the more recent examples of the Joker shooter, the Batman connection was where it kind of started. Then you had the Thomas Crooks-looking assassin on 713, multiple links there. We have the Batman Caped Crusader with the ear wound on Rupert Thorne. So I've been looking at this connection here, and I come across this article explaining the subtext to Full Metal Jacket and all its allusions to the JFK assassination. One of the points that it makes in this analysis is that Joker is based on JFK, and Joker has the target on the side of his head. And so it just points out one of the examples of how I'm correlating Kubrick with this head wound theme, but it gets deeper because the actor who plays Joker, Matthew Modine, is the one who gets shot in season 4, episode 8 of Stranger Things. And of course, 4-8 has huge significance. And when you see the mind maps, you'll look at it's exactly what I'm talking about. Just like The Boys, season 4, episode 8, they had to change the title because of the reference to an assassination. So we are not cherry picking. When we talk about predictive programming, it is widely acknowledged. Even if people don't know what it is and they call it eerie coincidences. And now that we've established this as a fact, we can, move forward with this. It's no longer a question. We're not confused. And there's a pattern to it, and there's an internal consistency, as you would expect, within a constructed fictional universe. Phones are open, 505-510-4226. I'm scrolling down in your comments. We had a very busy chat room last night. Unmitigated Mind says, I control the weather in my living room, so they are lying. Well, if you had a Trump sign in front of your house, a hurricane would have ripped your front door off. But if you paint your roof blue or have a Harris sign, you'll be fine. I mean, last year it was all about, well, 2 years, it was Maui, then it was Jasper, but there's always this talk about like direct energy weapons. And this is the thing, and this is how it works, the split. The left will blame climate change, the right will blame weather weapons and direct energy weapons. The left will say gun culture and the Second Amendment, the right will say SSRIs, create mass shooters. But you have these like boilerplate responses to everything. It's robotic. It's absolutely robotic. And you see people just repeating the mind viruses they catch. So I have to correct myself. I talk about mind viruses as a construct, as a hoax. They don't exist. But it may be useful to treat them as though they do exist in the context of the NPC mind aids patient that doesn't exercise any critical thinking with regard to visual media. So for most people, yeah, they are in fact mind virus carriers and super spreaders. And they may not know what they do, is the point. They're unconscious about it. Hark says, could it be an open-air panoptical prison where prisoners themselves volunteer and self-inform is easier to construct and maintain? I would say so. I mean, I think it's a remarkable feat of perception management and really just mind control to turn 1984 from a nightmare scenario into a way of life we opt into. We self-surveil. And social media is just a mind-reading machine. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Hey, I guess you can call me Alfred, right? I dropped a few comments in. I have a few points I've been wanting to bring up. The stochastic lying is what I've come to call it, because we talk about stochastic terrorism, right? Like
right.
Someone, they'll say something on social media and then inspire someone to go do something in real life. And so violence, but in this case, what would be called stochastic lying is when someone, perceives media, they read something on social media, and then instead of going out perpetuating violence, they perpetuate lies. They go out and tell lies because they've read a lie. And that is a much more tangible phenomenon.
I see it's like the way that rumors are spread from up on high and they trust the higher source and they repeat it. It's kind of mindless, but there is this instance where people do in fact become carriers and repeaters for it without going to the source. I saw this happen when you had the motorcycle rally in Durango, Colorado, where truthers were sharing videos of motorcyclists claiming that the Hells Angels were coming from California and going to Aurora, Colorado, to fight the Venezuelan gangs who had taken over apartment complexes. The whole story was fake, but it was spread by people who heard the rumor from authoritative influencers on their side, and with no fact checking, the story went, viral. And I think you're right about that. There is something about how they just put it out there and it does in fact repeat.
Yes. And there is the question of people's autonomy in this phenomenon. How much due diligence they put into their consumption of media, and then how much thought they put into their choice of communication when they choose to speak to other people, when they make their own social media posts. How much do they care whether they're repeating lies or not? And how much control they even have over it is a question, and for, people who are on the level where we might be at, where we, put a high level of scrutiny and skepticism to media, are going to be significantly less likely to repeat something at face value than people who believe media at a low information level, that more or less auto believe and then therefore auto repeat.
Yeah, that's actually something that's been well studied too. They found that a great percentage of people will share stuff, even if they know it might not be true, because they agree with the premise. And so these are low quality claims, and that's one of my main criticisms of Trutherville is the low quality repetition of claims or the excuse that they're just asking questions. So I've been pointing out it's not okay to just ask questions, not in the information age. You should show up with answers or the best possible answers, but just asking questions becomes an appeal to ignorance and an excuse to not look for better info. So, yeah, we have to be mindful of it, and that's why I've effectively created a quarantine so that we could separate from people who are advancing low quality claims in a very unaccountable way.
Yeah, I agree with this. You know, like I mean, I don't know. I am maybe a optimistic person. I like to give people individual responsibility. I don't like to look at people as like soulless automatons, and you know, and unfortunately that does carry with it some moral presumptions. You know, I mean, not that I'm, you know, I am, you know, fakeable or dupable. You know, I make mistakes. I certainly right now believe things that aren't true. I just haven't fully examined that yet. But I am at least willing to like take that step and put that context, you know. And so I feel like it is a moral shortcoming for, you know, to treat information and belief with such disregard. Um, and you know,
I agree with you. There is an
not
issue
to be
here.
judgmental on people, but it is, you know, something that I perceive in the way they act. And I guess I'll go into my next point. I do have a few points here I want to kind of keep, you know,
Yeah,
from
sure.
getting too tangented.
Sure.
So this idea of like head canon, or what we call mental simulation, and how that ties into belief, um, is like, it's important to realize that the and how this ties into the phenomenon of stochastic lying is that the reason why people are behaving in that way is because they're not viewing their mental simulation as that. They confuse the goings on in their own mind with reality, and you know, this affects all of us because I found in self-reflection it can be an emotional drive. And you know, often in interpersonal relations, you will, you know, maybe have an interaction with someone that was less than perfect, and then you're going to go home afterwards and like replay it over and over again in your head, and you're going to like create this simulation of the person you were talking to, and you're going to say, this person feels this way, this person has this intentions, this person views me this way. And it's in that emotional state, it is so hard to realize that that is in fact a self-created mental simulation, that that's not the reality of what happened. What happened is you had an unpleasant conversation with someone and now it's over. And then if you so choose, or if you lack the self-control or awareness, then you're going to go make up this whole story in your head about what happened and what that person is thinking, when you fundamentally don't know what's going on in that person's head. You don't know what they're thinking or what their intentions were. You only experienced something, and ultimately the experience is over. But I feel like,
Yeah, that's right. That's you're talking about the mental model that gets confused by with the terrain. And the trouble with this is that we don't often have reasons to question it because it's generally reliable. But where we're messed with is where our collectively agreed upon consensus mental model is infused with lies that we just more or less take in through osmosis, but they're not really tested. But I think we are also trained, and maybe it's cultural, it's engineered. I think we're trained to confuse our mental simulation with the real thing and to not see it as distinct. And I think this is designed to put us into a collective agreement on a very specific worldview. And I think that you raise up some great points, though. Neurolinguistic programming deals with this, on how often people will internalize things and it becomes something disempowering until they realize that, okay, this is just a mental construct and I can actually replace it with something better.
Yeah. I think that's what's so powerful. Once you have the enlightening moment where you're like, hey, this isn't reality. This is just my own mind. And then you have power over it. If you think your mind model is reality, then you don't believe you have the power to change it. Once you realize that you are creating the mind model, you've now empowered yourself to actively generate it rather than just be subject to what you have perceived and internalized.
Yeah, I call it auto belief because through trust and habit, people just automatically assume that what's on the screen is true. And a lot of the times it may not be a disruption. People don't notice the quote matrix, but it's because it's pretty much synchronized with your day-to-day experience. You don't see glitches in it, but it's the things that you don't think about every day that you just take for granted that I think are the things to focus upon. For example, weapons of mass destruction. The very scenario that some angry dictator could push a button and then we go into mutually assured destruction and lockdown, everybody's going to comply with a drill, with a hoax. Everybody's going to comply because it's been inserted into our consensus worldview that the mushroom cloud is real, that it's going to do this thing, and all these little videos we've seen, that it's a God construct. It's not just an atom bomb. It's actually a God construct that changes the whole world. And they see it on the screen. They are told about it in the news. They're told to lock down for fallout. And that's why I say that movies like Oppenheimer and series like Fallout, these are just PSAs to prepare us for future psyops.
Indeed. In fact, I think this would transition to my next point, which is the studying the model of the propaganda that we're meant to believe and how it's self-reinforcing. Like, if you don't believe in nukes and you start trying to convince people that, of the reality that there is no evidence for nukes and it's all just a screened worldview that lacks, empirical data. And if you go about spreading those ideas, the believers in that cult system, the people who really believe in nukes, they view you as dangerous because when you're preventing people from buying Geiger counters and building bunkers, because if you believe in nukes, you would want not only you to have that, you'd want all your neighbors to have bunkers too, and so these belief systems it appears, I think it wouldn't be a stretch to say the belief systems are constructed in a way that the believers push it forward. They're going to fight to, keep that belief system going.
I've seen it. I call them propaganda mules because they're carrying propaganda and they're not getting paid for it, and it's a burden. And I've encountered this many times. One person berated me because I wasn't afraid of military-age men coming across the border. I suggested that this was likely just a psyop to make you insecure. And I was chastised for not taking it seriously, and a lot of people were going to get killed because they're not ready to fight the invaders. I encountered this quite a bit when confronting chemtrail believers, because I think it's one of these instances where the evidence doesn't support it, and it's a useless thing to be paranoid about, and it has a lot of built-in logical fallacies. But as I brought up chemtrails are a hoax, I was hit nonstop by people who were insisting that I was spreading dangerous misinformation by saying it's not real. And it's like, well, if you think it's real, wear a mask. But none of them do. But again, the idea that I'm spreading dangerous misinformation by saying don't believe is the point here.
Yes. I think, and there's no accident that the people who accept those belief systems will act in a way to defend them. And I guess I was trying to transition, like I have a couple more, maybe two more points. This one, and so I don't know, I don't really have the right words for this, but lacking better thing, I'll call it like a narcissistic worldview in opposition to like what I think is a better state of mind, which I would call the state of self-love. And so the narcissistic worldview is controlling. And that's, fundamentally what they're doing is they're outsourcing the prison guards to be inside of the prisoners' heads. And they're doing it through propaganda. And if you want to have the peace of mind, the ataraxia, the equanimity, the epoche, you have to set yourself free. You have to really have compassion, for the whole world and yourself. And it's very difficult to do that, I've found. But the alternative is a far more dismal state to, be in. And so I think, it comes from within. And that's the thing that a lot of people struggle with, is that when we want to, we've been taught, we've been brought up in a culture of validation being external. All of these belief systems are completely built on external validation because they lack any empirical data. And that's, part of the reason why we can tell that they're fake. We don't need to go to Los Alamos and take apart their models and test their science to know that it's fake, because we can logically conclude it's fake through context. And in the same way, the difference between the narcissistic, lacking a fake word, like fake love, because it's like, oh, you love your friends and family so much, you're going to warn them about the nuke, but that's not really, you don't, in that state of mind, you don't have the awareness of what's really going on, because you haven't done that self-scrutiny and self-examination and epistemology. And when you get to like the deeper level of like, I'm going to love myself, I'm going to take care of myself and value myself. And this, only from a state of self-love can you fully, forgive other people. Can you love other people, really?
Well, I don't look down. I don't look
yeah.
down on people who fall for the propaganda or are spellbound. I don't look down at Normieville. Most of them are probably smarter than me, and people are just living their lives. And it's not even a question for most people, because it's like out of sight, out of mind. And these aren't areas where people generally even touch. It's outside the areas of acceptable discourse. They've effectively demonized conspiracy theory and any conjecture that gets remotely close to that. So what we're talking about is like outside of their purview. So I don't look at normies or even wokesters in any negative way. Truthers, however, holding themselves up as paragons of truth, deserve the criticism. And they deserve to be challenged, because they are trying to challenge everyone else's worldview. And I'm not a truther, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we have a lot of overlap, because we're both questioning the media presentation and what it means. But we just have two different methodologies. But I certainly don't look down on people for falling for it. And ultimately, I think it's all very much good news. I think it's good news that we're looking at mind war and psyops instead of false flags and some kind of blood-drinking cabal eating babies in the sewers, or whatever the QAnoners think.
Yes, indeed. I think that is something that, maybe, I don't know if we could ever emphasize it enough, that is such good news that we can, take apart this propaganda, and not only on a event by event or case by case basis, but that we've created a structure of, across the board, any particular type of event that meets the model. We don't just say, oh, this one news story was fake. We say, space fakery is occurring. We don't need to analyze each individual story, because we have a logical model for, putting context and into belief systems. And I think that is, a really awesome thing that we got going. And it is very positive and optimistic, for sure.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I make a distinction between low information believers and informed disbelievers. The people who consume a news story and they see the headlines and they believe it to be true, but they don't actually have any substantive knowledge about it, that's a low info belief. And when you weigh that next to someone who studied it, sees a bunch of anomalies, sees predictive programming, and has other indicators that you're probably looking at a hoax, that person's disbelief is heavier than the low information belief. And most people are low info believers. And that's all by design. They're high on trust. They don't feel like there's a need to scrutinize every single story, because if it was fake, it would have been reported as fake. They would have exposed it, is their presumption. And they don't know that media is a liar. And you could call it naivety if you want. I mean, I think that's fair to call it naive. regular news consumers are naive with regard to their, I guess, base assumptions. And I'm not cynical necessarily. I don't think this is, but the system is, and it plays upon our vulnerabilities in our perceptions, and people fall for loaded questions. They fall for marketing tactics all the time. We're a bunch of marks. This is a big circus. It's a big carnival world.
Yeah, I mean, those are some good points there for sure. That, and like the auto believers, they are optimistic in their own sense, perhaps albeit a bit too trusting. And like we say, I don't feel that they need to be, aggressively woken up. I think that the right thing to do is do kind of what we're doing. We pro-offer the truth, and we, maintain our quarantine, so that way our message is not diluted. And so if people want to join us, they can, but they're not going to be well received if they just come in as propaganda mules.
Yeah, exactly. And we also have to deny them the moral high ground. Because they believe a bunch of people died doesn't make them better, or doesn't make us ghoulish for saying it was fake, but rather it says that they're complicit in the agitprop. They're actually spreaders of propaganda. So they're actually as bad as the media in terms of being a part of the problem. And they also lose the intellectual high ground if they're not looking at news with a full understanding of how it is directly connected and synchronized with the entertainment area. If you don't see that, if you don't know about it, you're kind of ignorant at this point. And I understand this isn't something that's taught. There's no platform for media skeptics. But I have no interest in waking them up, because I don't think it's even possible. I don't think it's even desirable. If people want this information, if people want to be situationally aware, then they might arrive at this. But until this think tank, you didn't really have objective media scrutiny with Psywar awareness gathering into a group. I would say it's been kind of more or less scattered, atomized, and most people who are skeptics are drowned out in 1 foot in the matrix, 1 foot out explanations for things that don't quite tell the full truth.
Yeah, most people aren't willing to go that extra step, like especially the truthers, because I spend a lot of time in Trutherville to get here. And so, I deeply understand their world model in that they are exactly MSM plus. They see these news stories and they see that it doesn't add up, but they fail, for whatever reason, they fail to challenge the underlying premise. And they're still in this, second shooter instead of nobody was shot kind of perspective.
Exactly. That's the litmus test. The new litmus test is this. Did Trump fake his ear wound? And if somebody says, no, it was real, okay, they're in the mainstream box. If they say it was fake, but he did it to trick the deep state, then they're in MSM plus. They went deeper into the dream. Anybody who doesn't call it out as fake is just not being honest with themselves. And then if they agree that it was fake, then they have to also answer, well, then was the fireman shot? Was the Secret Service a part of it? What about the Associated Press? Because it reveals the big picture, and a lot of people don't want to see it. They want to focus on these little narrow rabbit trails that add a little spice to the mainstream story, but they don't want the whole curtain being pulled down for some reason. And I don't know why. Just rip that Band-Aid off. It's all fake. You shouldn't be attached to these idols anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand. It's hard to realize, I imagine the longer people are in it, the harder it is, to let go, when you've made, major life investments and decisions, about how you spend your money, how you spend your education and your career, and you've built it all in this fake worldview. And then the last thing you're going to want to say is, I've spent, 20 years, trying to prevent something that doesn't exist, because I believed that there was this threat, and I dedicated my life to stopping the threat, and then only later realized that I was lied to.
It's hard. It's harder to convince a man he's been fooled. Or as Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool a man than convince him that he's been fooled. And I don't suffer from that. If somebody could prove to me like right now, that all of the fake news I've ever watched was actually real, and I've been wrong this whole time, I would be happy. Like, please show me where I'm wrong so I can course correct and figure out what my flaws were in my thinking. And it hasn't happened yet, but I'm always open to it. My whole worldview, my model, you'd say, is it's falsifiable, and it updates periodically with new information. And I think right now, as a think tank, we have updated our model when it comes to recognizing the significance and the implications of concurrent and predictive programming. This is something that's always been fringed, overlooked, and de-emphasized, but I think it's the master key. If you can understand the synchronization, then you see the only real conspiracy. It's not all these stories, it's not the second shooters, it's not the subtext or the plots within these various psyops, but it's the synchronization of media in this monolithic fashion. That's the real conspiracy, and nobody else is looking at it. And so that's kind of like I'm saying, is that we have updated our models based on information, and it's actually leading somewhere. Whereas truth or bill has been stagnant, and now it's been flooded with hopium, mentanol, the Q pipe being passed around. There's still an Alex Jones town. I mean, it's a dump. It's a wasteland.
Yeah, the great point. Yeah, I mean, I actually, I was kind of, when I saw that Trump had won, I was like, oh, wow. Because I remember in 2016, I was like, fully in it. I voted for Trump in 2016, and then he won. And I remember there's this sense of like, for the whole 4 years, it was like, oh, we're won. I don't really have to do much. And so it did, because I was so believing in this, mental game, I had like, 4 years of more or less complacency because I was like, our guys are in charge or something, I mean, after 4 years of Trump, I had, I kind of realized that's the thing that I feel like, it's hard for me to I saw in the chat, yeah, no one is better, but people are on different levels of consciousness. And so, it's hard for me to imagine, so you voted for Trump in 2016. He was president for 4 years. He never made the wall. I mean, I guess it's the believing, how many excuses are you going to believe, for why, this guy says something, then he doesn't do it,
They fell
and
in
only
love.
later on,
Yeah, they're hooked on the
Mm-hmm.
story though, because the point I brought about the ear and the litmus test is that if they cannot recognize the significance of that act of fakery, that magic trick, and his obvious involvement in it, because he's the star character, he was the magician on the stage. He had to have performed some trickery there. If someone can't recognize that,
Mm-hmm.
then they're not ready to see the model. They're still in the movie. You could describe it as an alternate reality game. It's like the Truman Show, and people get attached to these characters and these stories. We're winning, we're fighting the deep state, and it was the story the entire time. Trump was never rogue. He was never bucking the system. He was never a non-politician. No, this is a lifetime role, and he's been following a script from the very beginning. There's no other rational conclusion, especially when you look at the vast body of Trump predictive programming going back to 1958, very clearly, and some lesser clear, I guess 1898, Ingersoll Lockwood, but it's there. The evidences of Trump as being a world stage historic personage designed for our fake history is there. He's an actor, he lives, he breathes, but Trump doesn't exist in the way that his believers and voters think he does.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of, hey, that reminds me. My last point that I wanted to get to is the role of fantasy, and there's healthy and unhealthy ways to consume and interact with fantasy. And so exactly, Trump is a fantasy. He's a widely believed fantasy, but nonetheless, Trump is a character. We can tell that. We have plenty of, the predictive programming, I think that is amazingly damning evidence that if people could look at it in a lucid state, they would see, it's pretty undeniable, in my opinion or perspective, that this synchronization between entertainment media and the news, it falsifies the news claims, pretty much unequivocally. Because like you say, I mean, this is, what you think that God is just happens to have some ridiculous political agenda, or this whatever's creating the synchronicities. Like, no, wait, this is clearly a human created system pushing human ends. It meets all of these, kind of pathologies, even, the way we can call mass media a narcissist. And
yeah,
all
Big
that.
Brother. Big Brother's a narcissist because that's a
Mhm.
useful personality to have if you want to have a dictator. And you're right about this. And to me, this is the big secret. The big secret isn't reptilians. It's not Illuminati. The big secret, really, it comes down to the synchronization of all media towards the end of creating history, and how quite often they have to act out historic scenes, simulations, but they act them out on the world stage in order to make these things real. And after this call, I'm going to play a clip here. I found it where Sylvester Stallone calls Donald Trump a mythological character and the second George Washington, and he says he doesn't exist. He's a myth. He says it ironically, but obviously it's literal.
Wow.
Well,
That's amazing. Yeah, I love how they do their little shout outs, when it's like the in group, like that, the one Hulk Hogan thing where
Hi, I'm
he's
JT, and I
talking
made
about the last time where Trump was looking at him and on the stage, and now he's switched roles more or less. But exactly, they definitely have their inside jokes that most people don't catch on to.
Yeah, exactly. From one WWE Hall of Famer to another, and then and I would say that the Rocky thing. He talks here about the Resurrection Club and how Trump is like Rocky, and then Rocky has this Christian connotation, this meaning behind it, and it takes place in this church turned into a boxing ring. But yeah, he's tying it together. He's actually alluding to the mythological basis for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is a myth in that sense. And I think it comports with this other theory about Napoleon not really having a physical existence, but Napoleon being actually a personification of the sun. And that's not a new conspiracy theory. That one's very old. The idea that Napoleon didn't exist, but if you look at his exploits, it was really just a way of describing the sun and its annual journey. And so in that sense, I think you could say that Trump is quite literally a myth, but they gave him flesh and blood through this actor that we're all looking at.
It is fascinating. I mean, to digress a bit, but yeah, that makes me wonder about the past, like exactly historical personages like Napoleon or even, going further back to like the Greek epics. Like how long has this been going on? Like, and how long has it been carried out in this particular manner? In the sense like, when Napoleon, in the era of Napoleon, was there a man who they had walking around, carrying out, like, obviously Napoleon is scripted. Like, I think that we can deductively say that with some heavy deal of certainty.
I see what you're saying.
Whether there was a real man or not. Sorry.
Did they have somebody actually fulfill the roles? That's what I'm thinking. I think that's exactly what they would do. It wouldn't just be a story, they print it, but rather it's a script that they act out because they're making history. So they have somebody going through the motions, but it's all simulations. It's all just theater, the theater of Cywar on the world stage. I think that's exact. I mean, does that make sense to you that they would actually have to physically go through the motions?
I think nowadays it's more necessitated than it was in the past due to technology. Like, everyone has a cell phone camera, so it would be hard if Trump didn't exist as a physical person. Perhaps in the past, it would be easier to, due to the more centralized control of media, to entirely introduce a false personage into the collective consciousness, because who's going to stop them? Like all these peasants who don't even know how to read and write, they're much less of a threat than the modern peasant who's armed with a smartphone. However, in the same hand, the modern peasant with their smartphone has been mind controlled, so they're unable to correctly use the tools they have. So even if someone like just the other day, that one very not Trump looking Trump who was hanging out with Elon, how many people are so cognitively like not present that they see that and they actually see Donald Trump and not someone in a bodysuit? Like, there's people who can't perceive body doubles because their mind has been taken from them.
Yeah, that comes down to the issue of visual illiteracy and how it's worse than illiteracy. Because, if you're illiterate, you know it. And you know that you don't have the same information as everybody else. But when everyone looks at the screen, I call it MSM literalism. Like, it's on the screen, so it's real. Well, the visual lies may be harder or even impossible to detect, like a good magic show. And you have to have a logical framework for consuming media in order to not be routinely fooled by default. But if you don't have that, you will be fooled by default as the deep fakery gets better and better. Like, I fell for a giant clownfish, and that shouldn't have happened. And it took me a few minutes to reconcile, okay, how did I fall for that? But it was so believable. So it's like, well, visual illiteracy is undetectable. That's what makes it so dangerous or effective.
Indeed. I guess I'll just wrap up my last thought and let y'all have the floor back. I want to leave with a bit of empathy for the world stage programmers, the writers and scripters of this, media show that's passed off as news. And furthering my question of the role of fantasy and looking at healthy and unhealthy fantasy, behaviors in humans as far as the creation and indulgence in fantasy worlds. And fundamentally, that is a very deep level of communication that when someone makes art or they make a story with a world and characters in it, these are all in a pure sense, they're going to come from within, so when someone writes a story, all of the characters in that story are representatives of them or their life experience. And so that's, why I think it's important, to understand, and part of that is the sharing of the story. So these people who write these metascripts, they're, creators, they might have a wildly different life experience than we have as normal people who aren't, presumably born into it, and so to them, it's like they're expressing to us, the masses, they're expressing their experience in life. They were born into some kind of astrotheological belief system that they are not allowed to even publicly discuss. They have to veil it in metaphors, because of their life status or whatever. But fundamentally, they're still humans and they're still trying to, express their human experience, their needs and their desires and everything. And I just think that, as easy and perhaps valid as our criticisms of the capstone level scripters are, it's good to still see them as human and have empathy. And otherwise, I'll leave you go. And it's been great talking again. See you around.
Okay, thanks for the call, and we'll continue along that vein. I have this book over here by someone named Michael Flynn, coincidentally, and it has this theme of this secret society that has a supercomputer. It's like 100 years ago, and they're able to make very specific predictions in human behavior en masse, and they're able to predict things, and they essentially assert control over history. The book's called In the Country of the Blind. Well, there's this journalist and her think tank, and she accidentally stumbles upon this information, and one by one, the people around her are knocked off. They're killed because the cult that controls this thing can't afford to let the information get out. Well, she ends up leaking the information in what's called a Q file. and it gets faxed to every country in the world, every newsroom. And when the public finds out that our entire history had been fabricated and that we were being directed surreptitiously by a small group of people with this advanced computer, there were mobs out for these people, and they were taken out. The mobs, the masses, were not happy when the curtain came down and they saw that they were being manipulated at a very deep level, even to the point of history having been faked since the Civil War. That's the theory in this book. Michael Flynn in The Country of the Blind. The theory is that, or the idea is that they wouldn't be well received, the so-called capstone level programmers. But that's a far cry. The caller's call for empathy is a far cry from what you generally hear. The QAnoners want to see the deep state beheaded on live TV. They want them killed and all their clones killed in Guantanamo. They want them to pay for their crimes. They're really about murdering the cabal. That's what the Q cult is ultimately about. You don't often hear about, sympathy for the elite. Okay, let us see here. Phones are still open, 505-510-4226. Let me play this. This is Sylvester Stallone hails Donald Trump as the next George Washington.
I'm very proud to be here. I didn't expect this, but I'll just keep it short and sweet because there's no such a thing as a speech too short. When I did Rocky, if you remember, the first image was a picture of Jesus, and it says Resurrection AC Club. I found a church that had been converted to a boxing ring. So the image pans down from Jesus onto Rocky being hit. And at that moment, he was a chosen person, and that's how I began the journey. Something was going to happen. This man was going to go through a metamorphosis.
So he's comparing Rocky getting hit and being anointed by Jesus thereby to Trump getting shot and the same.
And change lives, just like President Trump.
There you go. Jesus, Rocky, Trump. Same person. You've never seen them all in the same room together. And then he says, we are in the presence of a mythological character. This is the part I wanted to highlight.
We are in the presence of a really mythical character. I love mythology. And this individual does not exist on this planet. Nope.
Yeah, see, Trump doesn't exist, and nobody could have done what he has done. And this is true.
Nobody in the world could have pulled off what he pulled off, so I'm in awe. And I'll just say this, and I mean it. When George Washington defended his country, he had no idea that he was going to change the world. Because without him, you can imagine what the world would look like. Guess what? We got the second George Washington. Congratulations!
There you go, President George Washington, Rocky Christ Trump. A mythical character. Kind of a giveaway. Do you think Sylvester Stallone knows that Trump pulled off a magic trick? I think so. I think so. Okay, let's see here. And my basis for saying so is what? Sylvester Stallone was in some movie that predicted 2020 in a number of ways. Demolition Man. And anybody who's attached to predictive programming is in the club on some level. And it's safe to say that, yeah, he's not a dupe like the rest of us. So we talked about Jay Leno. Somebody mentioned JL, which is kind of funny. Jay Leno had a bad ear wound. They had to replace his ear. And now he comes out with an eye patch. This was on 11/19. So Synchromorphia said, could this be foreshadowing for another attempt resulting in an eye wound? Which is consistent with the plot as we have uncovered it. You see, we're talking about this thing called the metascript. We're talking about history as it's faked day by day. But they don't make it up day by day. There's a long-term agenda. And so this big script is what everything adheres to. And they're able to build up a lot of content for each of these events when they finally pop off. And we were already expecting the Trump head wound thing before 7/13. But leading up to it, we were watching, like, okay, when are they going to pop off on him? And we also had discerned or decided that the JFK stuff that has been attached to Trump is not likely to lead to JFK showing up for real, but it's meant to be an association. They want there to be an association with Trump and this contemporary myth, this sacrifice that binds the nation, or whatever it's going to do with Trump's head wound, but it's a lead up to it. David Pecker says his voice sounds like George Carlin. Yeah, I tried watching some new Sylvester Stallone movie, and yeah, I kind of agree with you. He sounds like George Carlin. And I started watching Salem's Lot, which is another Stephen King, after having watched his Doctor Sleep, a follow-up to The Shining. And a common theme with Stephen King seems to be adrenochrome and groups of witches or Satanists or whatever hunting little kids and drinking their fear and taking their souls. Like, that happens to be a reoccurring theme in a lot of his. I mean, I watched this one, Salem's Lot. It opens up with a child being vampirized. Then I watched the other one previously, Doctor Sleep, and it's a child being vampirized. It's like, what's with Stephen King and adrenochrome? Michelle Castor says, interesting how they juxtaposed De Niro and Stallone. That's an interesting one. And De Niro was in that one movie where he's a boxer. I think it has something. I didn't see it. Raging Bull. Raging Bull. And of course, De Niro has figured prominently in this Trump head wound thing. And so here's Raging Bull with a black eye. But yeah, you're correct. That is an interesting juxtaposition. And we have to look at Stallone as closely as we did De Niro now in this context. You know, because you got Robert De Niro portraying a senator giving a xenophobic speech when he's shot, just like Trump was. And then the shooter gets shot and his ear blows up. I mean, these clues are all around us. The foreshadowing is there. And when they brought De Niro out, it was a clear indication that there was going to be another John Hinckley-like event, another mentally ill shooter, another presidential assassination attempt. And it had all the Joker connections we referenced. De Niro gets shot in the Joker, and the Joker is based on a De Niro character, Travis Bickle, who was the inspiration for John Hinckley Jr. shooting Reagan. And that's just scratching the surface. This thing needs to be mind mapped out. I might do that today. I picked up a 18 by 24 sheet of paper for multimedia, and my plan is to build out some of these mind maps I've done, but doing it on a canvas or on paper, artfully. I think there may be an interest in it. Sort of like those bulletin boards that you see the conspiracy theorist guy with all the index cards and threads connecting everything. Kind of like that, but in watercolor. Okay, let's continue. We were talking about Tucker Carlson as part of the Pilgrims, some kind of Illuminati offshoot. Synchronomorpheus found this. In Mission Impossible, the villain's right eye is wounded in addition to his ear. Now, I haven't seen that, but we were talking about the significance of Tom Cruise. New Mandela effects. Maybe I'll skip that one for now. So here's Donald Trump at the WEF with Klaus Schwab, who looks like one of the strangers from Dark City. And he's doing his signature inverted triangle hand sign. And there's a black cube in the middle of the room. Enigmatic symbol. Convenient. I mean, I'd say consistent with what else you see in the room. If you notice, the WEF's logo has the line from the corona. Looks like an eclipse going through the 3 O's. Well, O is the 15th letter, so you get 6, 1 and 5. So you have kind of a 666 alluded to here. And then the line makes 6s out of the O's. And then 666 has many connections to the black cube itself. I think ultimately refers to matter and their control over the material realm and time in particular. So time and space. And time is something they control through faking news. It's really that is their formula. You control the present and thereby control the future and the past. And they control the present through synchronized fake news. Diana South says, if we missed the Discord chat, is there a way to go back? Yes, I will be uploading it. It was a very long chat. Linda Curtis says most of them look like CGI. Yes. In fact, I would argue here that the distinction between real and CGI has been intentionally blurred for a long time. And I think they've dumbed us down with special effects. Like, I think Douglas Trumbull, who is the special effects guru on 2001 Space Odyssey, alluded to how his special effects from 50 years ago still hold up today. But that computer-generated special effects from 5 years ago won't look good in 5 years. And that's because it's new, it's developing, and it's improving. Whereas before, you can't, I mean, you can, but it's difficult to improve upon synthetic versus the, I mean, on organic versus synthetic, on models. And replacing that with a computer model has this loss in realness. There's a quality to it that's been lost. And I think it's by design. I think the shift into cartoon violence, comic book special effects, and you look at these movies like Marvel superheroes and stuff, where it's always violation of physics, physical laws. It's always a bit comic booky. And that's all, I think, by design. Again, they want to blur the distinction between real and fake in order to maintain our confusion, our visual illiteracy. We're blind. We have the digital hoodwink. The hoodwink is a reference to the wool pulled over your eyes. And when you get initiated into their clubs, they pull the wool off. I came across an interesting clip. It's not 100% related to what we've been talking about, but this is from Doctor Strange 2016, where an individual is being let in on the idea that he can walk outside of his body, but that he's been looking through the world through a keyhole his entire life. And so we were talking about consciousness being a filter and how widening the aperture is a process of reframing your internal worldview. But here we go.
And looking at the world through a keyhole, you've spent your whole life trying to widen that keyhole, to see more, to know more. And now, on hearing that it can be widened in ways you can't imagine, you reject the possibility.
No, I reject it because I do not believe in fairy tales about...
Okay, let's move forward. So she pushes him out of his body and then gives him a brief primer into the astral plane.
Psilocybin, LSD?
It's just tea. With a little honey.
What just happened?
For a moment, you entered the astral dimension.
You entered the astral dimension. And she explains how he is able to step out of his body and have this contiguous experience. And it shows him flying through the atmosphere, travels around, and he goes back. But one thing that caught my eye, because I've always been wondering, the whole astral plane, it's always been described as a plane. And I thought, well, it's not an astrosphere. And if people are really traveling out of their bodies, wouldn't they know if the Earth was a ball or not? And I noticed that they actually put curvature. They put curvature in the astral plane.
This is real, this is real, this is real, this is...
Now, I don't know what movie it is. It's got NASA-level special effects. But it's interesting anyway. I think this is Doctor Strange. I don't agree with all of it, or every premise here. I don't think belief creates reality in the way it's being described here. Otherwise, moon landings would be real, because everybody believes in it. All right, let's see. I think we've covered most of my notes. I'll continue to watch Salem's Lot, see if there's anything relevant in it to our discussions. Dr. Sleep just reiterates Stephen King is one of them. This is something posted in our Discord by Lean Dion. Jacques Ellul wrote, "The orchestration of press, radio, and television creates a continuous, lasting, and total environment. Renders the influence of propaganda virtually unnoticed, precisely because it creates a constant environment." Yeah, that's the immersive illusion. And there's a really good example of this in a TV show. It was a 10-episode long series called Space Cadets, where they had a group of people convinced they were in space. And part of what made it work was total control over any kind of input, total information control. And then the second part was half of the astronauts were actors, and their job was to keep the non-actors from knowing that it was all a movie. And we talk about these actors on the world stage like De Niro or Stallone, and what they're really doing is they are maintaining the reality, the integrity of the movie for those who are still in it. It's a headline posted by World Stage. Ohio train derailment evacuee is living a real-life version of the disaster movie he appeared in as an extra. Like, this perfectly illustrates the overlap between real and fake. But our contention is that this is intentional, that this is not a coincidence, nor is it a divinely orchestrated synchronicity, nor does artificial intelligence have anything to do with it. This is simply an example of what media is and how intrinsic the simulations are to the fake history that they create day by day. So this overlap between this is why I say we're on planet Netflix. The overlap between Netflix and news, that it's consistent and often real time, is one of the biggest giveaways that what we're looking at is not in fact a compartmentalized set of messages coming from entertainers and news media that are somehow all separate, but rather, yes, they're separate and compartmentalized, but they're underneath the same capstone. World Stage says, "I'm surprised how many news reports were in on this." Yeah, that's another thing. Sometimes a lot of news agencies will notice something and report on it, and then it gets memory hold. After this one, there were a lot of people in Trutherville who said this is going to wake people up. And I said, it's not going to wake up one single person. Nobody is going to understand the significance of it if they haven't already examined media critically and skeptically. And it's just not there. But this is one example of many. We have some that are so specific. One of my favorite ones is the one about the drill that happened in Thousand Oaks, California, just a few miles away from where the Thousand Oaks shooting happened. So you have a shooting in a country music club, and down the street you have an identical number of people, 50 people being shot at, 50 crisis actors conducting a drill down the street. So the numbers are the same, the date's the same. Now this drill was scripted based off of Las Vegas. They were reenacting a concert shooting. So you put it together, 50 of the survivors of Vegas get shot at again in Thousand Oaks, while down the street, 50 strangers, crisis actors, are reenacting a drill based on what they just experienced 13 months prior in Vegas. This was described by the media as an eerie coincidence. That what are the odds that you would have a simulation for Vegas while the survivors of Vegas are being re-victimized down the street? There's too many layers. There's too many coincidences here to just overlook this. And it also has a great deal of implications for Vegas. And you have to ask yourself, what are the chances that 50 people at one event would be involved in a second event? Like, that wouldn't happen in reality, but it would happen in a fictional universe. And that's ultimately what we're describing here. Fictional universes overlapping with the real thing. It's a literary device. And that's because the script is essentially literature. And in order to perform our fake history, they enlist actors. They do simulations. All right, I'm going through my Twitter feed to make sure I haven't missed anything. Manly P. Hall wrote, "When the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men." Now, that's another one. You know, in addition to visual illiteracy, symbol literacy is pretty much mandatory. You cannot ignore the esoteric aspects of our PSYOP entertainment complex productions. They obviously draw from a lot of sources, but there's a consistency to it, and it's actually quite revealing. It's very suggestive as to what they really believe. All right, this is One-Eyed Jack and the Shells, Death to the Ball. I'm likely going to be live later. I'm working on a mind map, so if you subscribe to the main channel, we'll be live here. Y2L90 says, "If what we've been told about historical atrocities have mostly been fake, then maybe this isn't a prison planet ruled by evil leaders. It's just us doing all the evil to each other on a small scale." Yeah, that's why I question, could this be a benevolent dictatorship? And I often reference instrumentum regni, this idea, the instrument of monarchy, that superstition maintains the cohesion of the Roman state, that the masses are fickle, lawless, unreasoned, and violently angry, and the multitude must therefore be held in by invisible terrors and pageantry. This is from Polybius in the Histories in the 5th century, and he was describing this use of mythology and fear of gods to control the masses for their own good. So I talk about the mushroom cloud god complex, the atom bomb, which they brought to you in the form of Godzilla. Godzilla is a metaphor for the nuke. And I would contend that that is a god construct. And they've used it to reframe geopolitics, to get us all on the same sheet, and to make us all into God-fearing people. God-fearing people are easy to control. And atheists don't have any reason to fear God. However, they fear the nuke. They fear Godzilla. And it's just one example of many such superstitions introduced into our world view. And the term hyperstition makes a lot more sense to use than superstition, because we're talking about superstitions that are reinforced in a feedback loop. Anyway, thanks again for all the comments. Stay tuned. I'll send out the archives, and we'll be mind mapping this afternoon.
May she rest in peace.